Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Rewilding Big Cats in India, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Aditya Panda. I'm your host, Rabies. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a great weekend. And I've got a nice, well, let's call it a nice set of stories today for you to cheer up your Monday. Well, most webinars, even a lot of my webinars are very instructional or sometimes more like lectures, because one is usually trying to teach you something or, discuss a subject of importance. But, well, not to say that today's topic is not one of importance. It's a very, very important topic, and, especially in today's day and age, with the way in which conservation is going and all kinds of new conservation experiments that are being tried out, rewilding is very, very important and a very serious topic. But I want to introduce this topic to you through a set of stories that I have put together to tell you. And today's webinar is going to be mostly easy storytelling, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, before we get started, for those of you who haven't heard one of my webinars in the past or haven't had a chance to travel with me, my name is Aditya Panda. I have been leading NatHab expeditions in India since 2016, and I lead what are called NatHab's tiger trips. These are the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, India Tiger Quest, and India Tiger Safari, which is a photo pro expedition. When I'm not leading NatHab expeditions, I'm based in my home state of Odisha, which is sort of in eastern central India. And I keep myself busy here in conservation matters, things to do with tiger and elephant landscapes, and I involve myself in that a lot. Now, to get to our topic. I don't think there's anyone in this world who has an interest in big cats or animals in general who hasn't heard of this fabulous story called Born Free. Born Free, of course, there's a movie as well, but the book is the one that is best known. And we've all heard the story of Elsa, the lioness, and George and Joy Adamson, who raised her and attempted to rewild her. Elsa was an orphaned cub. You see, George and Joy Adamson, who you see here in the picture with Elsa, lived in Africa. And sometime in the 1950s, I think in 1956, George, who was a very senior game warden, was tasked with shooting a lion which had turned a man-eater. And George was out looking for this man-eater, hunting for it, and he was out on foot. And that is when he and his party of game rangers were charged by a lioness. They were not expecting this, but they came across a lioness who instantly charged at them. And in self-defense, George had to shoot her. Unfortunate, but he had to save his life and that of his game rangers. After he shot her, he realized that she was actually nursing. And they looked around and they found three little cubs, all females. And with nothing else to do, they had to get the cubs back to George's home. And there, his wife, Joy Adamson, she really took to the cubs, and the cubs became their family, their own. George and Joy became their foster parents, and they raised them. They lived a semi-wild kind of life on their farm until they started to get too big. And concerns were raised as to the safety of having such big cats, potentially dangerous animals, as pets at home. And under pressure from his colleagues in the wildlife department, George had to send the lionesses, the cubs, to a zoo in Europe. But when he went with the lionesses to the airport to send them off to put them on an aircraft to Europe, he had a change of heart, and although it would get him into a lot of trouble later with his colleagues and his bosses in the wildlife department, the smallest lioness in that litter, a cub called Elsa, who Joy was most attached to, was not put on the plane, and George drove back home with her. Now, Joy was, of course, heartbroken at the thought of having to lose the lionesses. They were like children to her. And when George brought back Elsa, Joy was overjoyed, and she made a firm, a very determined decision that Elsa shall never be captive in her life, and that she shall see to it that Elsa becomes a wild lioness and is once again free. And she started working on it. George and Joy both took Elsa out for long walks in the wilderness. She gradually learned how to hunt, and she got injured quite a few times by wild lions. And as she grew, she began to spend less and less time with George and Joy and more time by herself out in the wilderness, until at around the age of 3 years old, she joined the pride of wild lions and surprised George and Joy one day when she came back to visit them at their camp, and she had cubs in tow. So that was the beautiful story of Elsa the lioness in a very, very short summary. Now, Elsa did manage to become wild. She did learn how to hunt. She did join a pride of wild lions, and she did breed. So in many ways, that was a successful case of rewilding, something never heard of before. No one had ever taken a wild caught or any hand-reared big cat and turned it back into a wild animal. It was always believed that humans could never teach a big cat how to hunt. It's something they get to learn from their mothers, and that is partly true. In fact, more than partly true. But this experiment turned out to be somewhat of a success, although at the age of shortly after she gave birth to those cubs, Elsa suffered from a tick-borne disease called Rabies. In the meantime, George and Joy had to take Elsa away from where their main camp was based, and take her into the Serengeti, because Elsa was becoming a little bit of trouble to the local farmers, and people were getting apprehensive, and there was always the danger that a wild or a semi-wild lioness who was imprinted so strongly with humans might not fear people and might attack people. So she was taken to the Serengeti. That is where she had her cubs. That is where she finally turned into a proper wild lioness. But she got this tick-borne disease called Babesia, and that unfortunately was the end of Elsa. She passed away, but she left behind cubs. And in the meantime, George and Joy had also separated. But George was adamant. He wanted to rewild the cubs as well. And he went on to rewild several lions and lionesses, till the very end of his life. Both George and Joy suffered violent ends at the hands of people for very different reasons. But that more or less was the story of George and Joy Adamson and Elsa the Lioness. That story, of course, became a best-selling book. Joy Adamson wrote these books to raise funds for conservation. I have listed some of her books at the end of the webinar, at the end of the slides, and you can see them. But it also became a super hit movie called Born Free. And it's an amazing movie. It's available online. You can Google it up and watch it. And what it did was it made Joy and George superstars just as much as it made Elsa a global superstar. And this led to a lot of wannabe Joy and George Adamsons all over the world. Many people started trying these experiments with big cats, and India was no exception to this. India is a land of big cats. We've got more big cat species than any country in the world. We've got more big cat species than the whole continent of Africa. And there was no shortage of aspiring George and Joy Adamsons in India either. Now, this gentleman that you see on the slide was a forest officer in the 1970s in my home state of Orissa. His name was Saroj Raj Chaudhary, and he was the first field director of the Simlipal Tiger Reserve, which is in my home state. And this was in the 1970s. A lot of you must have heard of me presenting on Project Tiger, which was India's tiger conservation program that was launched in 1973. And Simlipal was among the first 9 tiger reserves that came into existence under the project. And Mr. Chaudhary was the founding field director of the park. He became very famous for the tigress he reared called Khari. Khari is a tigress named after a river by the same name. And the picture that you see on this slide is something that is very close to my heart. It's very valuable family heirloom in our family, because the gentleman that you see feeding Khari in this picture is actually my grandfather. He happened to be a good friend of Mr. Chaudhary's and would often visit him with our family to see Khari. Now, Khari arrived as a young cub, a very young cub, less than a month old probably. A group of indigenous people in the park were out collecting honey from the forest when they came across what they thought was an abandoned tiger cub. They picked it up, and this cub was found by a river called the Khari that flows through the park. This cub was picked up and brought to the field director, and the field director took the cub under his care. And in this slide you see the cub on the table of our chief minister, of our state's then chief minister, perhaps the only tiger to have ever set foot inside the chief minister's office. So the chief minister advised him to raise the cub in Simlipal, close to nature, and she wasn't keen on the cub being sent to the zoo in the city. So that's her paying Khari a visit after Khari has become much bigger. So the cub was kept in the household of the Chaudhrys, and Mr. Chaudhry and his partner became foster parents to Khari. But they did not really put in any efforts into active rewilding. They did not want to go the whole way as the Adamsons did. They became very attached to Khari. Khari became their foster daughter, and she was just too imprinted and too much of a pet animal. She was like a very large house cat, and there was almost no chance of her ever being a wild tiger. Although Mr. Chaudhry did take her into the park with him in the jeep, and she did go on long walks in the wilderness with him. She did even vanish for 3 days or so in the jungles when she was in estrus. And she also did find the company of a male tiger, a wild tiger. But she was probably too human imprinted. She probably got creeped out by the attention of the male tiger, and she came right back home. So she was never really set free in the wild like Elsa was, and she remained a house pet. And of course, she was under constant observation. There was always a person with a logbook watching her every move and noting down, how many times she panted, how many laps of water she had, how many times she spray marked, when she rolled over, how many times she licked herself. Every little bit of detail was meticulously recorded 24/7 throughout her life. But the unfortunate side of it was that there was a tremendous amount of anthropomorphism that Mr. Chaudhry and his partner suffered, and Khari became a four-legged, striped human child for them, which was not really in her best interest, was it? I mean, it's highly debatable, but it definitely did not support her requirements as a wild animal. She became a house pet, and she was spoiled, she was overfed, she was in fact obese, and of course she became very popular, and many films and documentaries and books were written on her. But this was an unhealthy level of anthropomorphism, and she grew up with other pet animals around the house. And yes, she wasn't a captive tigress in the sense that she wasn't in a zoo behind bars, but she wasn't a wild tigress either. She met a sad end at the age of about 6 years when she was in her prime, the prime of her youth. Mr. Chaudhry had been away on a conference in Delhi, and Khari had in the meantime been bitten by a rabid stray dog that she had come across, and she then proceeded to kill the dog. Not this dog that you see in the picture. This dog was a friend and a family pet, but a stray dog. And nobody really noticed that the dog was rabid, and no one in Mr. Chaudhry's absence, nobody really paid much attention to that. So when Mr. Chaudhry returned about 6 or 7 days later, he started noticing the first symptoms of rabies in Khari. And then it was then that he found out that this incident had happened with a dog, and that very likely the dog was rabid and gave rabies to Khari. She became increasingly sick over the next few days. Her nervous system began to get overwhelmed by the virus. And, a tiger with rabies is not a safe animal to have around. And on one occasion, in fact, she even, she had a habit of playfully biting people's arms. So people who were all usually around her, including colleagues of Mr. Chaudhary, Khari would come and playfully bite their hands. It wouldn't cause any injury, and it was a sign of play. But one day, she held on to the arm of Mr. Chaudhary's deputy, but she couldn't, her jaws involuntarily started tightening around his arm, and she had lost control of a lot of her own muscles. And rabies is a terrible disease that completely destroys your nervous system. So Mr. Chaudhary had to put her down himself, and that left him a broken man. He slipped into deep depression, and within a year he passed away himself. It is believed that he died of a broken heart. So that was the unfortunate story of Khari. But around the same time in northern India, now this is a book on Khari where Mr. Chaudhary has noted down her biography, including a lot of her logbook details. You might actually be able to find it on Amazon India. So if you are interested, you could look it up and order it. Around the same time as Khari lived, in northern India, in a completely different part of India, at the foothills of the Himalaya, in a region known as the Terai, which you must have heard a lot of my colleagues, our other expedition leaders from NatHab talk about. Our Nepal-Bhutan trip goes there to the Nepalese part of the Terai, but there's also the Indian part of the Terai. And there is a national park called Dudhwa. These are at the foothills of the Himalaya, which are, flat, alluvial, massive grasslands. And around the same time, a similar experiment, but this one was focused on rewilding. A similar experiment was carried out on a tigress called Tara. And, there was a huge difference between the Khari experiment and the Tara experiment. Khari was a wild-caught tigress who was kept under human care. She did contribute a lot to what we know about tigers today, what we know about tiger biology today, but she did not live or die a free wild animal. Tara, on the other hand, had a very different story. Now, Tara was kept by a very famous conservationist called Billy Arjan Singh. Billy was what we call a hardcore conservationist. After World War II, he bought a lot of land around that area in the foothills of the Himalaya. And he was always a very, very passionate wildlife lover and a hunter. But by the 1960s and 70s, he had practically given up hunting, except when he was called to hunt man-eating tigers or leopards. Billy had retired after World War II at the young age of 35 or so to the life of a farmer at the edge of the Terai forests. And he was, in fact, the reason why Dudhwa National Park was established. he was very concerned about the state of wildlife decline in that area, and he lobbied and petitioned with the government of India very, very strongly to have that area declared a national park. And on this picture, I have quoted Billy, a very famous quote of his, and it says, "The air we breathe and the water we drink stem from the biodiversity of the universal environment and its economics. The tiger is at the center of this truth. If it goes, we go." So that is the sort of mindset that Arjun Singh brought into conservation. Very, very forward thinking for his time. So Tara was kept by Arjun Singh, and Tara was a zoo-born tigress. Billy wanted to experiment with rewilding, and he was very, very clear that he wanted to take a captive-born tiger and turn it into a wild tiger. And of course, this is a famous book on him. Billy was also referred to as honorary tiger because he was no less than a tiger himself. So Billy petitioned our then Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, and she was extremely supportive of conservation. And under her orders, under her special permission, Billy was permitted to obtain a tiger cub from a zoo and to turn it into a wild tiger. Now, at that time, there were no tigers available in Indian zoos for some reason. There were no cubs, no young cubs available in Indian zoos for some reason. And Billy had to get one from abroad. He lived in his farm, as I said, which itself was sort of like a private wildlife sanctuary, and it was called Tiger Haven. It still exists as a museum. So Billy went to England, of all places, to get a tiger cub to reintroduce into the wilds of India. Now, we shall not go into the controversy that was there about it. Tara was brought from a British zoo, and there were some people who were claiming that Tara was not a pure Bengal tigress or Indian tigress, and that she was a mix of Siberian and Sumatran tigers. But that is a different debate. The fact is that Billy got a tiger cub from a British zoo and brought her to India. So once in Tiger Haven, Tara lived a life that was semi-wild. She was not kept like Khari. She wasn't. I mean, she was a house pet while growing up, but Billy made sure to take her out into the wilderness on long walks so that she could learn the ways of the jungle, and she could learn how to stalk and hunt. And gradually, over time, she began to become a fully wild tigress. I have this little video clip from a documentary shot at that time, and I would like you to put your volume on full and enjoy this 6-minute little clip that talks about how Tara was being turned into a wild tigress.
And she is 3 months old.
That's her just arriving from England.
Up to now, she's lived behind bars. From now on, her life will be one of increasing freedom. Arjun Singh is one of India's leading conservationists. He has just been honored by the World Wildlife Fund, which subscribed $1 million to India's $5 million Project Tiger, an all-out drive to save the animal in the wild. Arjun Singh has an extraordinary rapport with big cats. Even for him, to teach a zoo-born tiger to go wild is not a light undertaking. But he had already successfully reared and returned 2 leopards to the jungle. It might be a long process, but he felt reasonably confident he could do the same with Tara. Tara first had to establish a relationship with the other animals around the farm. Strangely enough, Billy's dog dominated her from the start. From the moment she arrived, Tara showed signs of her inborn hunting instincts. When she stalked a tame buffalo, she was careful to do so from the rear, just as a wild tiger would. Tigers don't become fully independent until more than 2 years old. Tara's education might take even longer. If it succeeded, it would be well worth it. Natural regeneration of tigers is slow, usually only half the litter of 2 to 4 cubs surviving. She had to get used to living with elephants and vice versa. The elephant is distinctly uneasy at being followed so closely by a tiger, even such a small one. Arjun Singh's elephants meet quite a few wild tigers in the national park. They're trained to be steady in the presence of an enemy who will, under provocation, sometimes spring at them. The elephant's final gesture makes it plain that Tara has come quite close enough. What threatened to be the trickiest introduction of all passed off quite peacefully. Harriet is the female leopard whom Billy has already taught to live wild, but she often returns to the farm for visits and showed herself quite willing to play with Tara. So Billy started Tara's training by taking her for walks in the forest. Tara, as befits a tiger, was a cat who liked to walk alone. She almost ignored Harriet, who sometimes joined them. Tara lets off steam in the chilly, early morning air. These early walks served a useful purpose, to get Tara used to the sights and sounds of the forest. Sights like the deer she'd one day hunt, bounding across the forest track. After a month, Billy Arjun Singh took her within sight and sound of a large herd of swamp deer to see what she'd make of them. Arjun Singh has no illusions about the future of Tara's kind. He repeatedly points out that fewer than 300 of India's estimated 1,800 tigers live in protected forests. The remainder he calls forgotten tigers, safe from firearms and the now illegal trade in tiger skins, but completely at the mercy of anyone who wishes to destroy their homes for a short-term profit in timber. He hopes his government will act to protect the forests in all of its 14 national parks and 135 sanctuaries, not just 3 parks, as at present. Otherwise, what is the sense of teaching a tiger cub like Tara to live free in the wild, when the wild may no longer be there? This time, the swamp deer escaped. But Tara will grow and learn, and in the safety of Dudwa, she will be able to put her skills to good use. But what of those other tigers, the forgotten tigers, not only in India, but across the face of the Far East?
So that was a film from the 1970s. So some of the facts and figures given there have changed for the better today. But that's I just put in that little clip there for you to be able to understand how Billy turned, how Tara's tiger training was put into practice, how she was taught to be a wild tigress, how she learned to use her own instincts and learned to understand the forest. And despite being a zoo-born tigress that came from another continent, she managed to be completely rewilded. Now, as to the success of Tara's rewilding, there is again a lot of controversy and many opinions and many allegations. There are some people who claim that Tara turned man-eater and that she killed a lot of people, which Billy, of course, never ever accepted. He followed her through the course of her life. He writes and says that she lived a fully natural, normal, long life through which she produced several litters of cubs, and that she died a natural death. But also it is true that around that time, there were a lot of man-eating cases occurring around that region. And although there were several factors why these man-eating cases were happening, and multiple tigers were responsible for it, it always became easy for people from the wildlife department or others who did not have a great relationship with Billy to blame that on Tara, and they were bent upon trying to prove that the whole Tara experiment was a failure. Now, of course, that also has a lot to do with Billy. Billy was a very cantankerous sort of person who, did not mince his words, and he had become a bit of a headache for the park managers in the area. But be it Billy's story or be it the story of the Adamson's lions, there is always the risk of hand-reared animals, hand-reared big cats being released in the wild, turning dangerous to human life. A lot of the lions that George Adamson released in the wild, after Elsa, not Elsa, but some of the lions after her, including some males, did kill people. And, no one can deny that, yes, there have been successful cases of rewilding, but that a big cat that is imprinted with humans is not a safe animal to leave in the wild. Anyhow, the story of the leopards that Billy rewilded was much happier. The first big cat that Billy rewilded was actually a leopard cub. He received a leopard cub that had been rescued from a market in eastern India, where it was up for sale by somebody who had caught it, and the cub was up for sale for anybody who might want to keep it as a pet. Back then, the Wildlife Protection Act and all the other strong conservation legislations had not come into force, and these things were quite common in bazaars and markets in villages around forest areas, for you to come across animal cubs being put up for sale for curious potential pet owners. So this young male leopard was brought to him, leopard cub, and it was a male, as I said, and Billy named him Prince. And this was the first big cat that Billy experimented with. And Prince's rewilding went very, very successfully, to the extent that unlike a lot of other big cats. Prince, once he was fully a wild leopard, he almost never came back to Tiger Haven. He established himself somewhere in the wilds and lived the life of a shy, elusive, wild leopard. He also had two leopardesses later after Prince, called Harriet and Juliet. And these were sisters. They had been rescued from somewhere again. And his experiments with rewilding Harriet and Juliet went very, very successfully again. But Harriet and Juliet kept coming back to Tiger Haven. Both of them were very, very tame, and their affection towards Billy and his dog Ely did not reduce with their turning into wild animals. Usually leopards hunt dogs. Dogs are a very favored and common prey among leopards, but these leopards had accepted Ely as a more dominant animal. They had accepted her as one of their own, and they were very affectionate towards her. So Ely had a great rapport with the leopards, and both leopards kept coming back to Tiger Haven. This is Billy feeding Juliet, and this is Harriet, who, in fact, after she became completely wild, would often not only bring her cubs to show them to Billy, but she would also choose to have her cubs at Tiger Haven because that is where she felt the safest. And she would have a room to herself where she would, which she would turn into her den, and she would have her cubs there. And her cubs, of course, were not imprinted with people. Her cubs grew into proper wild leopards and leopardesses. But one has to ask the question: how feasible, how viable, how safe, how scientific are rewilding exercises of this sort? One has to admit that such exercises were nice, curious experiments, but a lot of times these experiments ended up in the loss of human life. Not in the case of these particular animals, but in the case of many other animals in many other cases. For example, in the south of India, much more recently in 2010, a couple rewilded a pair of leopards, siblings, a male and a female, called Bully and Baby. Baby was a female, Bully was the male. Both of them were rewilded, but Bully ended up killing a person, and Bully also died shortly after that, although Baby survived and bred in the wild. But there is definitely an ethical question and a scientific question as to, number one, is this necessary? And number two, can it be done safely? The answer to that is that, they say that the path to hell is lined with good intentions. And that might be partially true for the kind of exercises that Arjun Singh and the Adamsons tried. They were personally attached to individual animals, and they did it out of, they were guided more by their hearts than their minds, probably, in doing all this. And they were, adamant about ensuring that these animals lead a wild and free life, to the extent that, at least in the case of the Adamsons, that they probably valued human life a little less than they should have. But the answer to this question is, if scientific, reliable, and safe rewilding is possible, the answer to that question is Probably yes. And I'm going to tell you how, and tell you another great story on how that can be done without human imprinting on hand-reared or captive-reared big cats. I have an amazing story from a reserve that is really close to my heart, the Kana Tiger Reserve in central India. And that is a reserve that we visit on our Grand India Wildlife Adventure. And over the past few years, a very, very successful experiment has been carried out there. And the process has been streamlined and is fairly reliable now, and definitely safe and definitely scientific. And let's, for the lack of a better term, call it the Tiger School. I will talk to you about Kana's Tiger School on my next Daily Dose of Nature webinar on the 12th of September. So do remember to sign up for that and to tune in for that. Meanwhile, here's a list of books on the stories that I told you today, and authored by the people that I talked to you about today. They are amazing reads. These are the books I grew up reading, and they played a big role in inspiring me to be the person I am today. And for all of you who are interested and love wildlife, which is all of you, these books and also these documentaries and movies that I've listed at the end of the slide, you are going to love these. So do take a screenshot and look these up if you're interested. And with that, I shall end this webinar and ask Rob to take us to the Q&A. Rob, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Aditya. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. So a lot of these stories today were about females. Is it more, are female tigers more apt to be rewild than male tigers? Is there a difference?
Well, the stories, in the case of the stories, it was probably coincidence that caused most of them to be females, but it is a really good question. It has been found that it is much easier to rewild females than it is to rewild males, especially in the case of the larger cats. Now, Adamson had great success with Prince, the leopard, who was a male. But in the case of bigger cats like tigers and lions, there does seem to be a much easier process, a much better chance of females actually reverting to their natural hunting instincts and being able to survive in the wild than males do. But that doesn't mean that that there aren't any cases of successful male rewilding. But yes, if you take up the ratio, the rate of success with females is definitely it definitely appears to be higher.
All right, thank you so much. Do we know why that is so?
Well, I can only speculate. In general, females tend to be wiser than males. This is an admittance that you'll agree with, Rob. I think the natural instincts of a female are to find a safe, secure territory in which there is plenty of prey, plenty of safety, lots of water, and settle in there. Also, females do not face the kind of deadly competition that males face from other males. Other males will in fact welcome the presence of a new female in their territory. Of course, the female will have to fight neighboring females, but that is usually less dangerous and less deadly than a young male having to fight off experienced wild males to be able to establish his own territory. That apart, young males have to rove over huge territories to be able to find a safe sanctuary. And also, if you look at cubs in the wild, cubs that are being raised by their mothers like they naturally should be, it is usually the females who learn how to hunt much quicker than the males do. Just have to admit it, Rob, the girls are better.
No argument here. Thank you for addressing that too. We appreciate it. So, are rewilded cats more or less likely to attack a human? Did you know?
They are definitely more likely to attack humans because the natural fear of humans is almost missing in them. Now, they'll still avoid unfamiliar people to a great extent. Cats are not like dogs. Dogs, like our pet dogs, love all humans. But our pet cats, they are very attached to people at home. But a lot of pet cats are still very wary of strangers. So that holds true for big cats as well. They are still very wary of strange people, but still, they do not have the amount of fear, the amount of unfamiliarity with humans that wild cats have, that wild big cats have. So, as I was mentioning several times through the webinar, in many cases, a lot of the Adamson's lions, and the case of those two leopards in southern India, there have been cases of these rewilded big cats actually attacking people.
Yeah, we've had several requests to see your recommended reading list again. So if you could maybe go back to that slide as we continue forward. Thank you.
There you
go. So now recently there were 8 leopards brought from Africa to India. Can you update that situation on how they're doing?
These are cheetahs, and not 8. There are 20 of them in India at the moment, and one of them actually had cubs, a litter of 4 cubs, but only 1 survived, 3 died. We've had a few casualties. Casualties were expected, but we've had a few casualties. We're still learning with the cheetahs here in India. First year has been hard. We've lost 9 cats, including 3 cubs that were born here. So 6 cats out in the wild have been killed. Of these, I think 1 was killed by other cheetahs, and which had also been released. There have been some cases where there was fungal infection developing under the collars in the humid monsoon season, and the fungal infection caused some sort of abrasion on the neck, which then got infected and caused septicemia and caused at least 2 cheetahs to die like that. And another problem we are having now is that these cheetahs came from Namibia and South Africa. So that, those countries are in the southern hemisphere, but we here in India are in the northern hemisphere. And in Namibia and South Africa, it is now winter, while in India, we are in the middle of summer. And the cheetahs, their body clocks have not adjusted to that change. So what's happening is that we are losing cheetahs to heat stroke, because those cheetahs, their bodies are still thinking it's winter, and they're growing their winter coat. And having winter coat in hot and humid Indian summer is not at all a good thing. So a lot of those cheetahs have actually been recaptured and put under observation, but we will hopefully make a success out of this.
Is it common to find orphan tiger cubs in India?
Well, not really. What often happens is both with tiger and leopard cubs, and also things like fawns, baby deer and things like that. In these animals, what happens is that the mother hides them somewhere securely, and she goes out hunting. Or in the case of deer, they hide their fawns in a clump of grass or under a bush, and they go off grazing. And when people accidentally come across these babies, they don't see the mother around. They think that, oh, this is a poor orphan, it's been abandoned, and they pick it up and they bring it to the forest authorities and hand it over to them. Now, what India has started doing as a matter of protocol in these cases is that wherever such cases of orphaned cubs have been reported, the cubs are being taken back to the site of capture. They're being put in a basket, and infrared cameras are being put around the area. And in most cases, the mother actually comes back and takes them. So they were not orphaned to begin with, they were just presumed orphaned.
Great, thank you for addressing that question. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we have time for today. So I'm going to throw it back to you for your closing comments.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed today's webinar. I look forward to seeing you all on the 12th for the next part of today's webinar. And I'm going to talk to you about the Tiger School at Kana. And have a great week. See you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.